off my stage.
Today you're going to hear some pretty frightening stories from women who say that they have become prisoners of men who won't let them go and are stalking their every move. They say they're scared to death, and really no woman is safe. So today not only are we going to hear their chilling tales of being stalked, we're also going to show you how you can protect yourself or your child from a stalker who would be out to get you. As a mother myself, I can't imagine anything more frightening than knowing that your child is in harm's way. Well, this is Joanne. Her daughter, Nikki, was killed 7 years ago by a boyfriend who wouldn't let her go. That young man is now out of jail. We're going to find out about that. And Joanne says he is now still stalking and terrorizing her family. But there's more. Joanne is afraid that her nightmare is repeating itself because Joanne's other daughter, Christy, is now being stalked by her ex-boyfriend. And Joanne says that this is more than she can take, understandably. Joanne, that's incredible. You only had 2 daughters, right?
Right.
2 daughters from the same family. One has been murdered, and now your other daughter is being stalked. Let's go back and talk about what happened to your oldest daughter, to Nikki, because I think that's an important point. You said you kept your head in the sand, and you didn't realize the danger your daughter was in until it was too late. But I'm not so sure that any of us might not have done the same thing. Tell us what happened.
Well, Nikki had been in a real good relationship with a previous boyfriend, and I asked her to come home to get an education so they could really make it work. I wanted him to go home and get an education, really work. Well, they ended up splitting up.
Did she blame you?
Yeah, she was upset. She wanted me to talk to him, and I didn't do it, and I should have, and I didn't. And it's a long story, but she ended up with the person that took her life. He was she was quite petite, 94 pounds, 5'1.5", and a big guy. She felt like she was protected. And there was something about him from the very first time I met him. Something that, my Doberman didn't like him. The hair on my arms stood up. You know, when they say dogs pick up on things, he could bring a big bone to the dog, and the dog's eyes would just kind of flame up, and he'd bare his teeth and wouldn't touch it. I mean, I thought that was really strange, and but he'd take over. I'd never been around that type of personality. He'd walk in and he was going to play cards. He didn't know us. He'd shove everything off my coffee table and put out his cards. He'd climb on my kitchen counter, and Nikki would tell him, you know, Mom doesn't allow that. He'd stay there, and then I'd come around the corner after a while, and he'd still be there on the kitchen counter. I said, no, Mom doesn't allow that. And the look that he'd give me, it was just like, nobody's telling me anything. And it just built and built from there.
Now, I understand you're not saying to her, get rid of him, because you'd said, kind of implied, get rid of the other guy.
Well, I didn't really want her to get rid of the other guy. I just wanted her, thought I was doing what's best for her.
Then why did you not interfere in this relationship?
She was upset, said that I was not treating her as a grown-up, as an adult. She was 21 years old. Well, at the time she was 20. But because of her stature, I guess I smothered her. And she felt I wasn't letting her grow up to be the adult. So this time I decided to back off of all the dumb things to do. I backed off, and I thought, well, she'll see him for what he is. And Nikki started really changing. She started shaking. The fear it was horrible. He would call continuously. She'd be out at night in the garage with her portable phone talking to him, and she broke it. She'd slam it down, whatever he was saying. She came in the house crying, and things that I found out after her death explained what was happening then, and it was just like he started taking over control.
How did you find out that she was murdered?
A fire chaplain came at 3:30 in the morning on the 29th. She was murdered on the 28th. And I was still up. I had moved into Nikki's room. I knew something was bad. I kept asking my husband to please call and talk to Nikki, because I felt he could get someplace that I couldn't, because she wanted to show Mom she can make it, you know, handle everything. And the chaplain came, and I got my husband up, and he went to the door, and he says, there's been a horrible accident. And Rick said, with Nikki? And he says, yes. And right then I said, murdered her. And it just stopped everything, right? When it was true. That's exactly what had happened. He had taken a shotgun and shot her in the back of the head. And, you know, I mean, that was the biggest, you can't believe that's going to happen. She wasn't out in all these bad places. She wasn't, you know, you expect it. When you see kids walking the streets, going to the taverns, using drug stuff, it's not that you want it to happen, but they're putting themselves out where there's elements of people that do bad things. Nikki didn't do those things. This was out in the country.
Now, you and your husband, this is a very stable home. You and your
married
husband,
30 years.
30 years. Mother, and no abuse in the family. No, none of the bad times or bad things. You said you had no idea how much she suffered until after she was killed. How did you find out what she suffered, and what did she suffer?
Her girlfriend came up to me and asked me if I saw the bow in the corner of the room. Great big bow that shoots the arrows. It was broken, and he had broken it over her back. Found out that she had had a concussion and her teeth knocked loose, but they were not allowed to use that in the courtroom. The jury never heard any of this because she said my boyfriend did it. She had been kicked out on the highway out of a moving car, kicked in the back of the pelvis.
So there were signs.
But see, I didn't see her.
Know about this
You didn't know about the signs.
That's when we wouldn't see her.
What happened to the boy who killed your daughter?
He was tried for murder. He changed his story 5 times. He called it in as a suicide.
How do you commit suicide with a bullet to the back?
Well, that's the way he called it in on the 911 call. He said, I was out of the house 10 minutes out of all, and came in and found her this way. And then when the paramedics came, he told them that. And then when the police came...
the paramedics confirmed it was self-inflicted. They asked that like 2 or 3 times on the 911 call, and every time he says, yes, it was self-inflicted. I just found her this way.
Because they're not allowed to enter a house where there's been a murder.
Until the police secure the area. And they didn't know that until they were there, and she was obviously dead when they arrived. And
very few people commit suicide. Your arms aren't long enough to shoot you.
No, especially not a tiny person.
It was a shotgun. He used a shotgun, and the end of the shotgun, they said, was 28 inches from her head. And it minimum, and it hit her with enough impact that it slammed her into a cabinet, and the cabinet splintered through her clothes.
Did he serve?
30 months.
30 months of a 5-year sentence.
He got a 5-year sentence, which was the maximum they could give him.
30 months?
But if you don't commit a crime while you're behind bars, you're out in 30 months. They cut that, that's your good time and all that stuff. And, you know, he's not a stupid person, he's an evil person.
So 30 months for that. Now, you told us that your nightmare has not ended. He's out of jail, and you say he's been stalking and terrorizing the family. What's going on? Isn't that breaking parole?
He had a restraining order against him, but he does what he wants to do, and he gets away with it.
Why?
If the police don't see it, if we don't have like a videotape taping him shooting paintballs at our house, which he did, and broke the door handle of my car, walking up onto our front porch, driving by our house, things like that, if we don't have an actual videotape or some physical evidence of it happening, then they say, well, you know, you're probably just making it up just to get back at him because he's out.
Well, they can't. The police have come and they've seen it, and it happens January 28th, the day he murdered Nikki. Every year we get our house sprayed with red paintballs to present her blood.
But there is.
And it's on her bedroom window and Christy's bedroom window.
This has nothing to do with breaking parole.
Well, he's not. I mean, he's off.
We can't prove it's him. He's off parole now.
At all, so it doesn't matter anymore now.
And then on her birth date, we get the red paintballs. We get the phone calls where the phone's picked up and it said, I want to speak to Nikki. And Rick said, she's not here. And he says, go dig her up. And
have you ever contacted his family?
No.
No, what I don't understand, his mother told me, she said, Nikki was the best thing that ever happened to her son, that he got him away from the bad people. And like a dummy, I didn't question it. I didn't say, why didn't I say, what bad people? I kept wanting to let Nikki handle things. I wasn't going to do the things that made her mad at me. I wanted that relationship, you know, and I just didn't do it. And
now, the tragedy here is that you've said you've had to live this experience all over again with Christy,
right,
who now has a restraining order against her ex-boyfriend for stalking her. Tell me what has happened.
Basically, I was in a relationship with somebody who physically abused me for 3 years and mentally abused me, and when I finally had the strength to leave, that was it. I left him. I did not want contact with him, and he couldn't accept that. He would be at my house every day, all day long. He hadn't been at my house for like the last 6 months of our relationship. My mom and him did not get along, and all of a sudden he was coming over and having coffee with my mom to visit with her. I'd have to call home before I came home to make sure he wasn't there. He would follow me. He'd send me flowers. After I had the restraining order, he'd sent flowers and didn't have a name to it, so I called the florist and finally got them to describe the person, and they described one of his good friends. And so I got a hold of his good friend and called him and, you know, talked to him about it and explained to him. I said, do you realize that you're breaking the law for him? He's not allowed to contact me at all.
This restraining order is up in December. Are you afraid of what he'll do after it's over?
Yes and no. I don't think he's going to try to kill me. Basically, if he faces me, I'm not afraid of him. That's what's got me out of it. I'm not afraid of him. I'm not afraid of the person who murdered my sister. I am not afraid.
You're not afraid of either of those two men?
No, because there's absolutely no way anybody is ever going to hurt me again. It's not going to happen.
Joanne, you wanted to be here today to give a message to other mothers. What is that? What can we learn?
when you feel something inside, and I think all of us have had that feeling. You walk into a place and something doesn't feel right. It's just like the hair on your arms kind of stands up, or you feel something in the back of your neck. Listen to it. And don't back off, even if your kids get mad at you. Don't back off, because there's something there. She was telling me the bruises that she was getting on her arms were play. She wasn't telling me the truth, and I knew. And I saw the control. I backed off with Nikki, and Nikki's dead. And the only thing I had in this whole life that I ever thought I did right was my girls. and Nikki never hurt anybody in her life, and she's gone.
For those of you who think it's easy to break up with a boyfriend, wait till you hear from this young woman. She says that for the past 5 years, she's been stalked by a man who won't let her go. He has followed her, tracked her every move, threatened her life, and done things that I think would send shivers up your spine. An unbelievable story next. An amazing number. Today we've been hearing going to hear some terrifying tales of women who've been stalked and in some cases murdered by a controlling lover. And for those of you who think that breaking up with a boyfriend is an easy matter, wait till you hear what happened to Cindy after she broke up with hers. She says that for the past 5 years she has been stalked, followed, threatened, and almost driven insane by a man she broke up with almost 5 years ago to the day. She says he's turned her life into a living hell, and really she fears that someday he's going to kill her. Cindy, I have to tell you that your story of being stalked is one of the scariest I've ever heard. I would think it would be like living a nightmare.
It is.
How did it all begin?
Well, you had mentioned also about the 5 years. It's 5 years ago tomorrow that I left this guy. So it's like an anniversary date for me. So this is a very emotional time. Back in 1986, I went to a Super Bowl party and met him. And he was a great guy. He swept me off my feet. I mean, just everything a woman would want. We started dating, and we became very serious very quickly. And we moved in together, and I was head over heels in love with him. And as our relationship progressed, I noticed small things with control, but I almost felt like it was because he loved me so much, little jealousy instances and stuff like that. I would get dressed for work, and he'd want me to change my clothes, or I'd go somewhere, and he'd say, you know, how do you know that person? And he'd be very insanely jealous. Well, it started with the emotional manipulation and control, and it began to escalate into, you know, physical abuse. And as the relationship progressed, I'd get strong and I'd leave, and then he'd say he'd change, and I'd go back, and I left him on 3 separate occasions. The last time I left was November 8th of '91. I moved out of the house, and I think at that time when I moved out, he just assumed I'd go back like I did the other 3 times if he cried, and sent me flowers, and I was determined this time not to go back, and I had support from my family and friends, and I got my own apartment. He didn't start stalking me right away. He tried to woo me back. He sent me flowers all the time and cried, and just the typical honeymoon phase that a woman goes through when she's battered. When he saw he wasn't getting me back with that, he thought he'd take a different route. And one day I was driving up the highway, and I saw this great big billboard on the side of the highway saying, "Cindy, will you please marry me?" with his name on the bottom. I really don't want to mention his name, which was unbelievable. And the next day I opened up the newspaper, and there were newspaper ads for me with marriage proposals again, and I still didn't go back. And at that same time, because this stuff was starting, I decided to take a job in a different state because I didn't want to run into him and see him. It was hard making the break and moving out emotionally in the first place, and I just didn't want to see him, and I had no idea it was going to escalate to this situation. Basically what happened is it started with phone calls. I get phone calls all the time, hundreds of calls a day. It started out with hang-ups, and then it progressed to threatening calls and then death threats. And I called the police, and they put a trap on my phone.
What did the police do for you?
Well, the police put a trap on my phone for me, and we were able to catch him calling from his home.
And then what did they do?
Well, it has an interesting twist with that. At the same time that he was doing this with me, he was dating another woman. And it turned out she was calling me too. Somehow, I don't know if it was a manipulation tactic or what kind of story he was telling her, but the calls were coming from his house and her work, so they both got arrested. They were charged with aggravated harassment.
How long? They were arrested. How long were they in jail?
They were arrested for aggravated harassment, and I went to court, and the charges were reduced to disorderly conduct, and they were let go that night.
Oh, so they didn't spend any time in jail?
The next day I got phone calls again with death threats. The week later I got sugar in the gas tank of my car, and my tires were slashed.
What does this man do for a living?
He's a correction officer. He's a prison guard.
I would think that if he'd been arrested for something, he shouldn't be allowed to be a prison guard. Does that make sense?
No, because the Department of Corrections, you have to be charged with a felony before they'll do anything, and these are misdemeanor and violation charges.
So you've never been able to put him in jail?
He's been arrested 8 times.
And he still has his job.
He still has his job.
He can still follow you, and you've never been able to put him in jail?
No, he's never done a day of jail time. He hasn't even had a $50 fine. His biggest penalty was he had a 6-month conditional discharge, which said he needs to stay away from me for 6 months, but he never did, so.
You told us that sometimes you wish he would just kill you and get it over with. Why do you feel that way?
Well, when he keeps calling and calling and calling and saying that, you feel helpless. And you feel like you're just waiting for it to happen. So you just feel like, say, okay, well, if you're going to do it, just do it. Instead of playing with me, just do it and get it over with. Because it's been 10 years of my life now. I was with him for 5, and he's been stalking me for 5. So it's like a decade of my life I've been manipulated and controlled by him, and he's been stalking and harassing
And there's
me.
nothing that the police can do?
Other than I have to just keep documenting things, and hopefully we'll get enough against him.
Even after 8? You've documented 8. 8 is not enough.
I don't know.
If he's listening, what do you want to say to him?
Oh boy. I don't understand why he's doing this to me. He has a wife, he's moved on. I just want to move on with my life and have a happy life. Life is very short. You have all this negativity in your life. Why don't you just go on and be happy with your life so I can go on and be happy with mine? I just want you to stop. I don't want to press charges against you if you'll just stop doing this. I don't care if you go to jail. I don't care what you do with your life. Be happy. That's great. I want you to be happy. I don't want to be vindictive and say you have to rot in jail. I just want this stuff to stop. I just want to be able to have my life back.
Not all stalkers know their victims. When we return, we're going to hear the tragic story of this 15-year-old girl who went for a bike ride and never made it home alive. This man is every parent's worst nightmare. You'll find out why. The young girl's family says that what happened to them could happen to you. Don't go away.
I just go, help, somebody help me, my God. And he jumps on top of me and starts digging this, I didn't know what it was at the time, but it was a Phillips head screwdriver, digging it in my ear and just jabbing me with it. And at this time, I'm thinking, my God, it's going on again, he's trying to kill me. My stabbings were so bad that I was 2 centimeters from being paralyzed, 1 centimeter for being killed.
Wow. And when does he get out?
He was sentenced 17 years for pleading guilty to attempted murder, 3 aggravated assault, and kidnapping.
Now,
But he's up for release this year.
You are the cop. Get off my stage.
Today we've been talking to women who say that their lives have become a living hell because they're being stalked by a man who won't let them go. While these are frightening situations, I think there's an even scarier phenomenon, and that's when a stalker goes after a complete stranger. This is Terry and Lauren Roach. Sadly, they know firsthand just how frightening and devastating this can be. On September 20th, 1993, their 15-year-old daughter Jessica went on a bike ride and never came home. 8 weeks after Jessica Roach disappeared, her naked body was found in a cornfield. She had been killed by a man who had a history of stalking young girls. Terry and Lauren, I know that this is the first time that you have gone on television to talk about your tragedy, and we want to thank you for being here. What happened on the day that Jessica disappeared?
Well, September 20th started just like any other Monday morning for us. The kids were getting ready for school. Jess was having a little trouble with her contacts. I helped her with it. I was getting ready to leave for work, which I had to drive about 150 miles away.
You live in a very rural area then.
Very rural, but I had just recently been transferred to another area, so I was getting ready to commute for the week. And I can remember helping her with her contact, and I remember thinking how pretty she was getting. So I went on to work, they went on to school. On about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I got a phone call from my husband. He said, one of our daughters is missing. I didn't think a whole lot of it at the time. I said, which one? And he said, Jessie. And when he said Jessie, it just scared me to death because I knew something was wrong. He said that she had gone for a bike ride, that Mindy, my older daughter, had taken the car and gone to town, and she had passed her on our road, which was about a half a mile from home. They waved, Jess didn't want to go with her, and Mindy turned the corner and went on to the store in town. She came home about 20 minutes later and found Jesse's bike laying across our road. That seemed a little peculiar to her because, you know, it was a brand new bicycle, so she wouldn't have done that. She stopped the car because she had to move the bike in order to drive on home. There was a cornfield on one side and a bean field on the other side. They looked, yes, there was massive searches. We had, I don't know, I can't even tell you how many people. They were on horseback, we had helicopters, people on foot, in cars, they were combing the fields. They looked totally for 3 days trying to find her. Nothing came of it. We just waited. We waited by the phone. We had a lot of help from the authorities. They helped us out a lot.
You say they finally found her. Tell me how you heard about it.
We were in constant contact with the authorities all the time. We got a phone call. Actually, I got a phone call at work telling me that they had found a body in a cornfield about 10 miles from where we lived. They didn't know if it was Jessy or not, but they wanted us to know that they'd found someone. It took them a week to identify her because she had been there since September 20th. She apparently died just a few hours after he had taken her. So she'd been in that field for 7 to 8 weeks. She had no dental records. They couldn't tell, just from looking at her, who she was. What they actually finally did was they rehydrated her fingertips, and because of fingerprints that I had done when she was 6, they were able to identify her in that way. They took DNA testing to confirm all of that, but if it weren't for the fingerprints, we probably still wouldn't know.
14 months later, your daughter's killer, Larry Hall, was arrested. 14 months after that. How did they find him?
He had actually returned to the Georgetown area. He had been following 2 other young girls in the area. He had followed 2 others on another date. The 2 that he followed the last time happened to get a complete license plate number, and they were able to track it to his home, which was over 100 miles away from where we lived.
You and Terry say that your daughter's killer made a chilling confession about how he abducted and then killed your daughter. What did he say?
Well, he told the officers that he stopped on the road and talked to her, and that he grabbed her from behind and put her in his van. He talked about how he tied her up. He talked about how he thought he might have had sex with her. He said that he took her afterwards to a place where there were a bunch of trees and there was a river, and he walked her back to a tree. She at this time had no clothes, he said. He said she was crying and that she was asking for her mom. He sat her down by a tree, and he put 2 belts around her neck, stood behind the tree, and he strangled her.
Did he say he was angry that she was crying for her mother?
He said that made him mad.
Terry and Lauren, you say that you were devastated after Jessica was murdered. Lauren, you told us that it hit you especially hard and that you were consumed with guilt. Why?
Because I wasn't there to protect her.
I think guilt is a natural thing when
It
you
is.
lose a child.
You can't be with your kids every minute.
No, you can't. But that feeling of guilt is a very normal.
It hangs on and you can't get rid of it.
This man had 9 prior stalking complaints before Jessica was killed. It's what I said with computers, to keep track of things. And in the trial, 9 girls testified that he had stalked them. Why was it so important for the two of you to be here today?
I think it's very important that people realize that there are people out there who you don't have to know them, they don't have to know you, that they're just looking for an opportunity. And with Jesse, that's what he did. He was in our area for none other than, he was there for a Revolutionary War reenactment over the weekend. He apparently drove around, saw somebody he liked, and followed her home. And the end result is that Jesse's dead. And we need to be aware that there are people like that out there, and we need to be cautious. It's important to make sure that if you have young children, that they be fingerprinted, because dental records, if they've never had a problem, aren't going to help.
That's right. And that's the only way that you can tell sometimes. Would you know how to protect yourself or your child from someone who is out to stalk you? Well, when we return, we're going to tell you some pretty interesting stuff that I don't think you know. Important tips and safety measures, how you can keep your family out of harm's way. And later, a very chilling update on a news anchor who has been stalked by this man. Today we've been talking to people who say that their lives have been destroyed because someone is stalking them. We've seen all the headlines and heard about celebrities such as Madonna and Whitney Houston and Jodie Foster who become the target of an obsessed stalker. That's what you were mentioning. A while back, we did a story about Lori Lasowski, who was a news anchor at WGRZ in Buffalo, New York. She was being stalked and terrorized by this man. Take a look at this clip.
Luckily, I live with my parents because I don't know what I would have done if I was totally alone. And as I was watching out the window, he looked up at me, and I turned the light off and got extremely scared, and that's when he took his pants down, started fondling himself, and it just, I was very, very frightened, ran downstairs to my parents. They looked out the window, couldn't believe it. We called the police. By the time the police had gotten there, he was gone.
Then we heard from her stalker, Michael, who wasn't very happy with what Lori said on our show. Take a look at this clip. I received numerous letters from this man charged with stalking Lori. His name is Michael Taylor, and this is a portion of his letter. Dear Sally, either you are a complete idiot or you just don't give an expletive about what happens to anybody. My name is Michael Taylor, and I'm the man who stalked TV anchorwoman Lori Sadowski. I recently got the opportunity to watch the show which featured Lori. I couldn't believe it. My impulse was to find Lori and tear into her like an underfed pit bull into an expletive plate of prime rib. How dare you allow that girl to come on your show and read a sensitive, personal man-woman type letter in front of a national TV audience? Don't you care who gets maimed or assaulted or murdered as a result of something that happened on your moronic show? There is one reason and one reason only why I didn't find Lori, grab her by the throat, and smash her head against a suitably hard surface. That reason is my only daughter, who needs me to help her along. Otherwise, make no mistake, I would be in a prison cell and Lori would be spinning in a hospital bed trying to recall the plate number of the truck that hit her. Reading any part of a man's letter of romantic passion is wrong, sinful, and downright dangerous. Sincerely, Michael Taylor. Well, what happened after that show? We got in touch with Lori, who says that she has found happiness in her life. She is leaving her TV station to pursue other things. Says she has not been bothered by Michael since she got a restraining order against him. Here's the bad news. We have still been getting letters from Michael in which he signs himself the Stalker. We received one last week. He signs it Michael, a.k.a. the Stalker. He is still upset with Lori's comments, and I don't think he's too thrilled with me either. But we spoke to him, and he says he is trying to move on with his life. Michael, we certainly hope you do just that. We'll be right back.
You are the foul. Get off my stage.
These have been some chilling tales from people whose lives have been devastated and turned into a living hell because someone has been stalking them. What would you know to do if this happened to you or your child? This is Trudy Gregory, and Trudy is the director of the National Victim Center. Trudy, you've been listening to our guest today. Is this fairly typical? Are these stalking stories fairly typical?
Yes, these stories are very typical of both of the kinds of stalkers, stranger stalkers and the simple obsessive stalker in which most domestic violence and jilted lovers, that category they fall into. You
have some very helpful ideas and ways that people can protect themselves if they're in a stalking situation. Would you describe these points, these things point by point? And by the way, if you are currently in this situation, you get out a pen and pad right now and take some notes, okay?
Some of the things that victims can do, especially if they are in a situation where they have begun to receive threats against their life, is to make sure that they have a safe place in their home. This means choosing one room and making sure that door to that room is a solid core wooden or metal door, not a hollow door. That there's a deadbolt lock on that door from the inside, and that you have a cellular phone that you can keep in that room. Take it with you in the car during the day, but keep it in that room so if the phone lines are cut, you can run to this safe place and call for help. Make sure if you're in a stalking situation that you document everything. Document phone calls, document the messages, document exactly what's said.
But I think Cindy didn't you document and nobody paid any attention to you?
Well, I tried to document everything I could. I kept a journal and I reported everything.
Exactly, and why that's important is because when it gets to the 8th and 9th time and the law enforcement is not listening to you or the court's not listening to you, they've not documented the case at the police department, you have something that can back up what you're saying to prove you're not crazy, because the automatic reaction
she's a crazy woman
of people is to say you're imagining this.
Yes.
So besides documenting, saving message tapes, just as Cindy did, that are left on the phone, making sure that when you begin to receive gifts, and as those gifts progressively become more threatening, progressing from flowers to candy to dead animals left on your doorstep, to make sure you document by photographs or actually keeping those things, making sure that you don't set up a pattern in your life, that you vary your routine.
We'll be right back. Trudy, I think this gentleman wanted to know, is there anything you can do to frighten the stalker from doing this?
Unfortunately, for most stalkers, because of their personality disorder or their mental disorder, they do not look, they are very irrational when they look at a situation. Some of the things that you can do are to, first of all, report everything to the police so it's documented. Whether there's action taken on it or not, always report so that stalker knows that you're going to report the crime. There's no absolute guarantee of safety, no one action you can take. If you are you run into your stalker or if he accosts you, try to remain calm, stay in the conversation, don't cut it off immediately, but try to get away as soon as possible to a safe place. Almost every state has passed some type of stalking law in the last 5 years. California passed the first law in 1990.
We've done 5 years of stalking shows.
Exactly.
Why haven't they done anything? Are they not being enforced?
Part of the reason is that 3 years ago, almost all of those laws were ruled unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court.
Why?
So now legislatures around the country are having to go back in and redo their stalking laws to make them constitutionally sound.
What was unconstitutional about the stalking laws?
The unconstitutional aspect was, part of it was the fact of so much of the evidence that had to be turned in to legally prove the stalking, where the defense lawyers were arguing that that was invasive into the stalker's life.
Invading the privacy of the
stalker.
life.
Exactly right.
We'll be right back. Trudy, I want to thank you for all the information and help. We haven't done a show like this in a long time. And thank all of you. We've learned something. If it's helped one person or one mother, then certainly it is worthwhile. We want to keep in touch with you and maybe update you as time goes along. See you next time.
Get off my stage!